Hey, welcome back to the channel. So recently I was in the market for kind of a general all-purpose lens. And it really came down between the Tamron 20 to 40 f2.8 and the Sony 20 to 70 f4. So I started off with the Tamron just because it was a little bit lighter, and I took it on vacation with me. And overall, it was a really great lens. There were two things about that lens that I just didn't really like when it came down to it. One was the zoom range. I just didn't find 20 to 40 to be all that useful. 20 was fine, but I was always searching for just a little bit more zoom range than the 40. The other thing was the stabilization. I think it's become a pretty well-known fact now that third-party lenses don't interact well with the IBIS in the Sony cameras, and definitely not with the active stabilization that come in the Sony cameras. So I was a little bit disappointed with the stabilization as far as video goes with the Tamron 20 to 40. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't as good as I was hoped it could be. Before I settled on the Tamron 20 to 40, I went ahead and sent that lens back because after using it for a while, I thought that I really wanted to at least give the Sony 20 to 70 a shot before I settled in on a lens permanent in my bag. Here is a lens review by someone who doesn't do lens reviews. More of a practical review, if you will. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room, f4.0. And I know to all those bokeh obsessed people out there, this one, it's just gonna hurt a little bit, you know? And I keep trying to tell myself, like, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. You don't really need below f4.0. In fact, you know, I thought the f4.0 was going to be a much bigger deal than what it's turned out to be. It really turns out that I take most of my photos and videos outside and in good lighting. Also seems like when I'm on vacation and everything, I take a lot of group photos, and in both cases, when you're outside, you're taking group photos. F4 or higher is, kind of where you want to be. So even when I'm traveling or doing these type of videos right here, I want to show just a little bit of the background, I kind of get caught in the trap of 1.8 or 2.8 and getting a really blown out background. But in reality, I want to show some of the background. But I want just a little bit of separation, but not just, completely blown out. And I think F4 is kind of the perfect sweet spot for that. The F4.0 has actually been pretty nice to shoot with. Rather have 2.8, absolutely. There's no question about that. But with a lens like this, you have to make compromises somewhere, and I think the positives far outweigh the negatives in the 4.0 of this lens. I'll have to admit, though, I haven't shot much in low light with this lens. I'm thinking the 4.0 won't be the best in low light. I've used 4.0 in low light before, and it hasn't turned out that great. Some Sony cameras do a great job at higher end ISO values, but this lens may struggle if you plan on doing a bunch of low light shooting. I just wouldn't recommend it for that. The only other negative that I found with this lens is the aperture ring is a little bit thin or narrow, so it's kind of hard to find when you're wanting to change the aperture. But other than 4.0 and this kind of a small or narrow aperture ring, those are the only two negatives I can find. That's it. That's all the negatives. So now let's talk about some of the positives. First, let's start off with the zoom range of this lens. I found the zoom range from 20 to 70 to be just about perfect, Like, I'm never finding myself needing more or less zoom range or wider than 20. So I think 20 is just about perfect. A lot of these general all-purpose shooting lenses, they start off at 24 or 28, and to me that's just a little bit tight. With those lenses, I've always wanted something just a little bit wider, just a little bit wider. And I think this 20 millimeters is just pretty much the sweet spot for me. And I think that the 70 millimeters offers a pretty good distance on the long end as well. And luckily with Sony cameras, they give you different options to get a little bit more reach out of your lenses. Like you can use APS-C mode and get out to about 105. So when you're getting out there, if you're starting at 20 and get out there to 105, That's just a really good zoom range for an all-purpose lens, especially one of this size. I mean, it's just fantastic. I'll be honest, when I first pulled this lens out of the box, I thought it was definitely going to be a no-go because of the size and weight. But when you put the lens on the camera, it really balances well. I think because it's rather short in its retracted position, it doesn't want to tip the camera forward, you know? It has a really nice balance to it. I've used it for hours at a time and felt very little fatigue. I think the size and weight are fine, especially if you're going to be using on a decent sized camera such as an A7 IV or A7R5, or even like I got it to use the ZV-E1. I think it'll do fine on that, particularly since I now have the cage on it. I think it'll fit perfect with that camera. The biggest positive of this lens is the stabilization. While it has no stabilization in the actual lens, because it's a Sony lens, it plays well with the IBIS and the active stabilizations in the Sony's cameras. I was pleasantly surprised with the stabilization while using this lens. Yes, while you're pointing the camera ahead and walking, you're gonna get some jitters and some weird stuff, but overall, I thought it was usable. While you're panning, sometimes you can get kind of that jumpy where it try to catch on, and it skips forward a little bit, then it catches on, and kind of creates this jittering motion in a pan. But like I say, overall I think it's usable for sure. It really shines. It's kind of a locked off shot where you're just trying to film something, like I was filming flowers and plants and stuff like that. I mean, I could just sit there and hold my shot and it was rock steady, like pretty much gimbal like. And I think that's really where the active stabilization and the lens work best together. And if you just want to do a locked off shot, you can easily do it handheld. It's so nice being with Sony for so long and suffering through all the shaky footage. You know, we can finally put all that behind us. Now, thankfully, these new cameras coming out with the active stabilization and the dynamic active stabilization, you pair that with the Sony lens, you're gonna get at least usable footage out of the stabilization. And it wasn't like that before, trust me. So I'm glad we're headed in the right direction with the stabilization and the Sony cameras, thankfully. I really didn't think I was gonna like this lens at all, but it has slowly started to cement its place in my bag. It's just so versatile. I mean, no, it's probably not the first lens I would grab if I was gonna shoot portraits or something like that. It's not the first lens I would shoot if I was gonna shoot at night. Maybe to shoot real estates or landscapes or something like that. But if I'm heading out the door and I'm not sure where the day will take me, this would definitely be very high on my list. This is an everyday lens, one that you can keep on your camera. I haven't taken it off my camera since I got the lens in. And honestly, that ought to tell you all you need to know. The Sony 20-70 f4.0 lens is awesome. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.